Second breakfast, SportsCenter for war, Saturday Night Live for war crimes. We're really not so sure about that one. Kicking it off, your director of war policy. I don't. What's his title now?
Well, technically it hasn't changed, but yeah, he would be your Undersecretary of War for Policy.
Okay. Headed to the Senate yesterday. It was way more fun than it deserved to be, I think. Tony, take us away.
The first year or two of an administration requires you to have a lot of nominations for a bunch of, subordinates that a lot of people don't think about in the news. It's not just the cabinet secretaries. It's all the undersecretaries, assistant secretaries that usually go through some sort of nomination process that requires you to sit in front of the Senate. And they usually bully you a little bit. Everyone gets their pet issues in. Usually the Alaska delegation makes you promise you'll visit Alaska. Those sorts of things. As it came out of the hearing, which I believe was for Austin Dahmer, and I forget his specific title. I think it's Deputy Undersecretary, if I'm correct. It turns out that OSD has just been ghosting Congress. Which in some ways is not surprising. But usually, there's a bunch of stuff that, Congress will get from DOD even when they're not playing nice in public. And it seems like they've just unplugged their phones, according to many senators, bipartisan. I believe Senator Cotton referred to the office as a pig pen's mess, and his comms director PR person, whoever, later clarified that he was referring to the Peanuts character, not an actual pigsty.
Which conceivably would be cleaner and more orderly, apparently.
It's actually just a cloud of dust that exists outside of OSD. Not actual pig troughs. I'm so glad they were specific about that. But yeah, so basically this went from your traditional hearing where, even if they beat up on the guy or girl, they're still willing to vote for them. I don't know what this looks like, because it seems that you have these former Senate staffers who are going in front of their old bosses and colleagues, have basically ghosted them, and are now expecting, of course, you'll give me my job that I've been underperforming at in an acting role or some capacity for the last 9 months. So I think it was good to see that pushback. I hate that it's gotten to this point, and I think it gets into what we talk about a lot here of where is the quality of work from the professional class for national security? And it's very evidently not in OSD right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I have lots of thoughts about Colby. I think in the lead up to him trying to get this position, he went hard on, the strategy of denial, and that we were in the wrong, we were, positioned incorrectly across the globe, and we needed to reset. So we needed to really focus on China. And then he comes into the office, and really the first thing that he says once he's in his confirmations is, hey, really, Taiwan's not really strategic. And the strategy of denial is, yeah, I wrote the book, but I'm a gettable voter on that's not actually our strategic interest. And I think you get a cascade down from that, because if you're going to be that squishy on germane policy to the department and how it organizes and funds itself, then how does your office answer any question on any decision you make? Because if the reason you're pulling out of Romania is because we need to put 2,000 troops in, Taiwan, or more on Japan, then, there becomes a trade-off, and you have that you can have a policy discussion. If the reason that you're pulling 2,000 troops out of Romania is that you just don't want them to be employed in Europe anymore, and you have no plan for where they're going to be used next, then again, that becomes a very difficult conversation to have in front of the Senate Armed Service Committee.
I mean, having seen these processes, happen on both sides, on the congressional side and on OSD, Congress is used to getting kind of run around a little bit by OSD. They'll send things late. They'll classify things so they don't have to answer them publicly. And on the OSD side, they're used to ridiculous requests from Congress, right? There's always this kind of game of, which reports do we really owe first, and how much effort do we have to put in them? Can we make the contractors do it? But it's very clear that, Congress, which has largely been absent for the last 9 months, seems to have, taken upon themselves to realize, oh, like, we need to not abdicate our responsibility and actually conduct oversight of the legislature. And, this is the type of oversight of the legislature in one form, which I wish was more common, which was holding DOD's feet to the fire, not just to show off for sound bites. Because I don't think that was the case. I don't think running into the midterms, it's great for a bunch of Republicans to, go after their own folks. I'd say the same thing of the Dems, right? Like there's not a whole lot of play there in the national security world. But
Yeah,
it's very clear that
that's a
they
good
see
point.
this as their job.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point, because like I think at one point, I forget if it was Cotton or who, but they made the comment like, "Come on, man, we're on your team." Like you're basically boxing out the people who would be defending you if you had made the low bar effort of communicating, just like anything of the decisions that were being made. And so yeah,
Yeah, and
it's
I was just saying, like, and what we mean by communication is like it's literally as simple as like your ASD getting on the phone and talking to a senator, once a month. Like it's not a bunch of I mean, in some cases it is, right? If you're moving troops out of Romania, and a lot of I forget the exact percentage, but a lot of the policy decisions for Eastern Europe when it comes to troop numbers, et cetera, are driven by Congress. Congress basically held DOD's feet to the fire and said, "You're going to do this." So I think that's also where it comes in. But it's you just talk to them, send them notes. Hey, give them a briefing. Like it's not the hardest thing in the world, guys.
I'm curious to what extent this is reflection of like there not being a strategy, or like the strategy changing every week or two, such that like that conversation, which in a prior world would be kind of pro forma, just turns into this like weird performance art. I mean, we just had Trump. The Wall Street Journal reported out a few days ago that President Trump has repeatedly expressed reservations to top aides about launching military action to oust Venezuelan President Maduro. But even basic questions such as whether the goal is to remove Maduro or compel him into concessions remain undecided, officials said. And like, yeah, all right, if we're at simultaneously like sending carriers to the Caribbean, as well as like having no idea what you're going to do them for, then yeah, if you're like if you're in OSD and the senator calls you, like, yeah, just don't have the briefing, because like, what the hell are you going to say?
It's actually an easy time to be a staffer, because you can say anything and it will be true at one moment from one person. You will always reflect one segment of the royal court's disposition towards Maduro, or towards turning lead into gold, or whether that device flying through the atmosphere, the Atlas III object, is filled with aliens. I mean, you're going to be correct. It's just whether or not you're correct enough.
It's the Heisenberg uncertainty principle of political commentary.
That's correct.
we have Schrodinger's foreign policy at this point.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. That the administration is both absolutely dedicated to regime change. It is going to wipe out transshipment of cocaine from Latin America into the United States, Europe, and elsewhere. And it is also not doing any of that. So you just gotta get a table at Cafe Milano, hit record on your iPhone, and hope for some magic.
It is interesting that in a lot of ways, at least what it looks like, based on like the Wall Street Journal reporting and some things like that, like if you strip away the statements that are like to the press by the president, he has a lot of the same, I don't want to say instincts, but reservations that Joe Biden expressed about things, it sounds like, on the use of military power. It's in some ways that's really interesting. And I wonder how much it almost becomes, because so much of the administration is divided, where you have the nationalists and you have the what's left of the China Hawks and things like that, where they're like, some of them are very like, the Joe Biden approach was very much anathema to their being. But you have a president who like very clearly, like at least in closed doors, sounds like he expresses real reservations about the use of military force. Sure. And then yet you have that application just continuing across. I mean,
we went to war with Iran.
We went to war with Iran. We threatened
Yeah.
to go to. We're threatening to go to. Is it Nigeria?
It's Nigeria.
Yes.
Nigeria. Yeah. We're Venezuela, potentially Colombia. We talked about Colombia at one point.
Mhm. Yeah,
there was Mexico.
we
Panama,
struck ELN
Canada,
paramilitaries.
Greenland.
Greenland.
Yeah,
dude,
Denmark.
Greenland. We forgot about
That
Greenland.
seems like it was 2 years ago. It was like 6 months ago.
Yeah, it was during the first phase of the administration. The royal court was different at that point. You had the scheming vizier anchored around Doge, and also getting into fistfights with the Treasury Secretary, and possibly having sex with the spouse of a senior White House official. If you pay attention to somewhat credible reporting, I mean, I'm not trying to be sordid. I'm just saying
Eric,
that
we're trying to get sponsors, okay? We gotta
It
draw the line
won't be
somewhere.
by Elon Musk at this point.
yeah, no, that if you are trying to monitor these issues with any sense of professionalism, that, yeah, you can reflect back on Senator Sullivan being extraordinarily disappointed with the policy office. But that's not just like a one-off, that there's this cloud of people with formal positions, with informal positions. There are friends and donors and advisors, and the AMBO to Turkey is this minister without portfolio who's going all over the Middle East. If you're trying to determine what the actual policy of the United States is, there's nothing less helpful than reading the National Security Strategy or the National Defense Strategy. It will tell you literally nothing. It will actually probably confuse both partners, allies, and adversaries. I don't mean to be glib about some of the consequences of Scott Bessent or someone else like punching Elon Musk in the eye, but that happened. And if you're going to be a foreign policy professional monitoring the ebb and flow of decision-making in the United States, you have to account for all of it. So I talk about Cafe Milano, but that's sort of like a salon for a segment of decision makers, and you have to be a witting.
Is it still Cafe Milano? Like, what is,
Yes.
I think if we can get 5 minutes of content for Jordan here, is where are people hanging out in DC that I can go sit down and listen to gossip in?
Yeah. So I think if
like, is
you're
it still,
if you're over 50, it's Cafe Milano, no question. You get midwit food, and you get to see like the assistant secretaries like dining together with Kellyanne Conway. It's like, if you want to dine in DC but feel like you're on a cruise ship, go to Cafe Milano.
Just struck every bad note in my notebook.
Yeah, and what's remarkable is that there's this excellent French bistro right next to it that is also heaving, and you should go there. But the story is, and I haven't dined there, if you are young, far right, and you adore cocaine, Butterworth's is where you're supposed to go. I'm just reflecting the profile.
Sponsorships from Trend in Nicaragua, okay? This is not part of our monetization strategy. There will be no cartels getting shout outs in a positive manner. We are
I'm not saying it's
terrorists
good
on this pod, okay?
Yeah. Apparently the cooking is capable and competent, but the scenesters have turned it into like a dime square in Southeast DC.
Look, man,
but in terms of hang out, like the first administration, you'd go to the bar at the Trump International down on Pennsylvania. Like, that was a place to see and be seen, that cavernous, glorious courtyard that they have in the hotel, but that's no longer the place to go. So, Tony, I guess I don't know what the locus is of the cultural moment.
I think it's still Navy Yard. I think my former residency in Navy Yard would point to Mission Dos, which is the second Mission bar. That is definitely the nightclub that's not a nightclub, but everyone stands in a line outside to get in it. And then there's like the various restaurants owned by the same people who own Mission Dos in Navy Yard that are probably the big spots as well. I think that's kind of the especially for foreign policy Republicans. I think that's where they go, and then you get closer to the Hill, and then it's Bull Feathers, which has a special place in my heart, and then all the other terrible bars around Capitol Hill. I think people still do go there, but yeah, if you're looking for the fun spots to listen to, it's probably either Navy Yard or some awful cafe in Georgetown.
We are also not open to sponsorships from Iranian intelligence agencies looking where to put their microphones. But
Or
we
in
would
that-
take
in
it.
that-
I would definitely have an official restaurant of Second Breakfast. I feel like that's in the offing. So
Ted's
yeah.
Bulletin.
That
We're
we-
going with Ted's Bulletin.
The
Yeah,
silver,
Ted's
the
is great.
silver diner out in.
Yeah. But we joke about Cafe Milano, but Cafe Milano is the site of an Iranian MOIS targeted killing effort. That some of these,
right.
we can snicker at it, but it has been an icon of DC power dining for at least 15 years, but probably back to like the start of the Obama administration, at least. And when the Iranians sort of had a slapstick effort to get assassins across the southern border, and it was picked up through a variety of human intelligence means, they were going to put a car bomb outside of that restaurant to kill the Saudi ambassador to the United States. That was a very real plan. Whether or not they could have landed it is a different question, but Cafe Milano is a salon of contemporary American power. And people go there not to, I don't know, get chicken piccata or something. They go there because
I'm on the menu. They have a dish called Linguine B. Johnson, which is linguine, lobster, and spicy tomato sauce. You have to wait 20 minutes for preparation, though. I'm not sure.
Remarkable. You'll know that it.
Okay, new topic. Counter UAS. How are the drones doing these days? Can we are shotguns the answer, Justin?
They are an answer. I think from a military perspective, we would call those final protective fires. So that's the idea that like, oh shit, everything else has failed. We have to do something. Realistically, though, like the companies that are, I think, over-indexed on computer vision attached to guns, what they're denying is the speed and then the volume of drones, and they're very reliant on computer vision. Probably advances in the next 5 to 10 years that are going to be able to do really, really high fidelity distinguishing between friend and foe, and then really, really high fidelity distinguishing between objects in the background, birds, something like that, and then an actual drone that's coming in. But the thing that makes counter UAS really hard, like just up front, is some of these FPVs can go 200 miles an hour. So like from the time of acquisition to sighting to firing, like it's seconds. Because they're coming through trees, or they're coming from just beyond the horizon, like just at the level where you have a hard time seeing them because they've had some type of scout. Then they pop up, and then they're going in for the kill very quickly. It's not the armed drone isn't normally just sitting up hunting, waiting. There is a non-armed drone that is the spotter. That is then helping direct that FPV pilot onto their target. So really, you have to have a layered approach, and some of that you can see the evolution of drones has kind of followed along the way that layered approach has gone. So the first thing is like denying RF signal, which has led to the use of what effectively is a poor man's tow missile, which is an FPV with a fiber optic cable. And some of these fiber optics, we've seen some coming out of Ukraine that have between 5 and 15 kilometers of fiber optics coming off of them. I mean, that's a very long range, device. So then the question becomes, with your computer vision sensor that's picking them up, like if they're just relying on computer vision, what is the distance that you're getting? How are you firing? And then does that even work when you get into places like, urban combat or ships near the shore, in like relatively friendly ports? Are they going to have these things turned on and then start shooting into basically the crowd if they have these counter UAS systems turned on? Topics will come up.
Yeah. So to step back for a second. So when it comes to counter UAS, like in any sort of air defense planning or there are certain basics, right? So you have to decide, what is your actual engagement distance between the time that you detect and the time that you shoot, and traditionally it's been, okay, at what point, when you do this planning from a traditional standpoint, at what point does the commander have to make the go, no go decision to fire, right? Because there's a time delay between, by the time you say go, hit the button, fires, oh, actually we missed it. It already came, straight through the side of the carrier, right? And in some ways that's still true. The Patriot missile system, for example, like has an automated mode. So when you're getting to this, right, like drones are not functioning at that speed. So you would think, oh, I have more time. But the difference is that they're going after more tactical assets that have likely less compute around them, have less high value to have those sorts of systems around them. And so you have a different calculus of you're now, with a smartphone or I don't know, a Raspberry Pi essentially trying, and I say this because, based upon Ukraine, like if you've got a Raspberry Pi attached to, let's say an automated shotgun turret, as an example, like you have to make that calculation quick, which means you need things that can detect it reliably. And then are you detecting one drone versus 10? The thing about drones is until they're on terminal, and terminal can be like 10 feet, you don't know where they're going to land. Like you can guess, okay, I'm the only missile system in the woods. I guess they're going to come for me. But their point of impact is 360 essentially, right? Like they don't have to come straight at you. And that's what makes a lot of the calculations harder of it's not, I just predict the path and I fire. It's, I have to be able to predict the path, fire enough to probably hit something, which is why I've for years said, well, at least you have a shotgun because you get that burst fire of 8 rounds or whatever, but it's still not enough. And so drones are very small for the most part, especially when you're talking group 1 to 3, 4 and 5 are much more like what you think of your Predators and stuff that's flying at 10, 20,000, 30,000 feet. So that's different than an FPV, which is maybe the size of a bread box coming at you at 200 miles an hour with a 5-pound warhead on it, or grenade or whatever. So that makes it really hard. And to your point about how do you distinguish friend from foe, that's something that we haven't even talked about. I would say, as a defense community, of when you have two swarms going at each other, you can't just fire a microwave burst. So for those who don't know, a lot of talk as well, microwaves are the way ahead because microwaves can fry the electronics on board. And these things are so cheap that they're not going to have defenses against it, or it's going to destroy the comms in between drones. It's technically true. Microwaves require a lot of energy, and then you're talking about energy at range with enough mass to be able to disrupt, an entire swarm or a major system, and that requires a lot of power. That requires, a lot of. And the thing is about a lot of power, a lot of radiating power, is that lights you up like a Christmas tree and makes you an easy target, right? It's the same thing. Like PAC-3, super efficient missile system. Super effective, I shouldn't say efficient, super effective missile system. However, that is like a priority target if you're a battlefield commander of like, I can take this FPV drone and pretty reliably probably go kill it if I can get close enough, right? And that applies to any major system.
Yeah, it's the Russian SA-21 is one of the components of their S-400 air defense system. If that thing turns on, everybody in the world knows where it is. Like everybody who's looking for it knows where it is. And so like they have to be very careful about how and when they turn that on and things like that, because people will know where the emitters are. The other thing about like microwave, when you talk about power, everybody thinks of directionality. They think it's like I point it this way and this is the way the microwave beam is going to work. But the way that the energy actually radiates is there are lobes that come off the side and the back. So to have enough power at range to disrupt or fry circuits, you also have spillage going backwards and to the side, which is generally where the good guys are at. So like, yeah, you can make some popcorn while you're frying the drones, but like, you know what I mean? Like the knock-on effects, it's not as simple as just like, yeah, we're going to have this system and now we've solved it, because there are some really, really hard engineering challenges that come up to, well, how do we protect our soldiers? Because that's the thing, for the drone defense system to be useful, it has to be near where the people who the drones are going to target are. You know what I mean? You can't strap it to an Abrams. You can't strap a microwave emitter to an Abrams, or you can, but you're going to have to change the drivers out pretty regularly. because you're going to slowly cook them. And it just becomes one of those things, like a lot of these solutions, and they're great thought experiments, and they're great like in isolation. But what happens with each of them is they try to get sold as like, this is the answer: computer vision, mounted on guns, or it's microwaves, or it's we're going to block RF. And the really, it's a kaleidoscope. And the number one defense to drones right now in Ukraine is early identification and the ability to move quickly from the location you're in. Like, that's the number one defense. Everything else is so it's really like really basics in your training. It's, we don't transmit from the place that we live. We shoot and we move very quickly so that we're not able to be quickly targeted. When we see a drone, we scatter. We don't move in columns. It was what was happening to the North Koreans, right? The North Koreans came in using their significant mass and just kind of lined up and started coming across, and they got hammered by drones and very quickly realized, like, oh shit, walking in a platoon file where we have like 2 meters between people is just like shooting turkeys. For those of you who've never shot turkeys, if they're flying, you can literally start from the back and just shoot them all the way to the front and they won't move. And it was the exact same with the North Koreans as they were coming in. They were just kind of like all in rows and just getting picked off because they hadn't learned yet that they had to disperse.
Eric, do you have anything on this?
The concern I have is Justin elevated the contemporary reality of the Ukrainian front, and I think it's extraordinarily instructive. It is, how do policymakers, not necessarily at like the Undersecretary Colby level, but people inside the Army or inside the Marine Corps, or Navy or Air Force for that matter, pick through these extraordinarily revealing stories from the war in Ukraine? And how do they determine what's going to be most likely, what is a likely concern in the future? What's an unlikely concern? And how do you shape a force to make the United States military more resilient in the 2030s? Predicting the future is useless. Forecasting the future is often helpful. And professionals need to collect all of the evidence that we're seeing from the front and not over-index or overfit it onto what our future force disposition is going to look like, but still learn the lesson. And I think that's going to be extraordinarily difficult. The military, the American military, has at times looked to foreign conflicts and picked up exquisite lessons. I think we've talked about George B. McClellan being an observer of the Crimean War in the 1850s. The United States Army looked at the Yom Kippur War, the October War of 1973, and modeled heavily after that. And those lessons were extraordinarily helpful and revealing. What I'm concerned about for our policymakers is how do you take battlefield lessons and couple it with the gizmo cult that is infecting American military thinking, acquisitions, and the commercial rings around the defense establishment. Because I think there's still a spirit out there that if you just had the right gizmos, if you had the right tech, if you bought the right equipment from Silicon Valley, you would win. And it's clear that if the Ukrainians would have won if the promise of the UAS or defense tech revolution was true. And it is not. The Ukrainians are still mired in a knife fight for the national survival. So I bring all this together to think about my caution, is that we are in a moment where the experience in Ukraine is sort of like the Crimean War preceding the American Civil War, or the Spanish Civil War preceding the Second World War, in that there are obvious lessons, and then there's examples that are going to provide no value whatsoever in the future. And I am uncertain if there's just like a team inside the Pentagon that's looking at this and trying to assess it fairly. The Office of Net Assessment was disbanded.
No,
that was a team that was supposed to look at this.
Reformed.
It is back in a direct report to DSD now.
Which is so. they are broken up, reassessed, and they're reporting to the right person at the Pentagon. Like Feinberg is the brain trust. So perhaps my commentary here for the last couple of minutes isn't particularly profound, but I am concerned about the gizmo cult that has infected the Pentagon and whether or not they want to hear anything or whether they're just going to continue to hear what they want.
So I think that gets to like I've spent more than my fair share, particularly in the last 9 months, talking to a lot of commanders about these sorts of issues. A lot of them get it. A lot of them get it, and then I see people people equivalent to them give quotes that are like, "Well, we wouldn't fight the way the Ukrainians are," and you're like, "The Ukrainians don't want to fight the way they are. They have to." And so I think there are battlefield commanders who understand necessity. For the locus for that right now is what is now Training and Transformation Command. The transformation side clearly gets it because they while they are buying the gizmos, they do understand that like, hey, we need to get after this fast. Whether what was formerly Training and Doctrine Command can reform itself to not take 5 years to write an FM 3-0, which is, for those who don't know, is just the operations manual for the Army. It has pictures, but fun story about that.
Mainly pictures.
Yeah. So when the last one came out, it was delayed because publicly it was said that they delayed it because of the lessons from Ukraine, which at this point was the first year of the war. What had actually happened was they got to the meeting to talk about it, and there were in fact lessons from the war in Ukraine as well as other things that were being presented. No one had read it, so they had to cancel the meeting and come back like 6 months later because they were like, oh, we didn't know there were going to be changes in this manual. So I don't know how you
consider me incredulous. So you saying that a meeting at the American Pentagon was disrupted because someone admitted to not having done the reading? Shocking. You're telling me that some aide-de-camp who competed for a role to carry some doofus's briefcase didn't put out 5 bullet points on a 3x5 card, and that general officer didn't think that they were perfectly prepared to talk about the future of Army operations? For shame.
I was actually thinking about this the other day. There's this like resistance to some degree within the U.S. Army in particular, but kind of across the military forces on how prominent many senior ranking generals from SOF become in the military. Even like Kane was, while he wasn't directly SOF, he supported SOF. You see a lot of like former SOF officers that arrive in like the highest points of the military. And I started to have like a theory behind it, and one of them it was in dealing with some officers who had not been SOF, is that they kind of get routinely humbled by the fact that they much later in their career have to still deal with enlisted men who are actually the experts in their job. Like a case in point would be like in the Middle East or in Asia, if you were in the U.S. Army Special Forces and you're in first group and you're, let's say, a battalion commander. So this is a lieutenant colonel. You will have spent about 4 years, maybe 5, in your unit/AOR. Your warrant officers and often NCOs that work and support you when you're at that level will have spent 20 years, like in Korea, in Thailand, in Taiwan, in Japan. They literally know, like, oh, I remember when the commander of the Thai military was a captain. Like they'll say things like that. And there's a humbling there that happens that doesn't happen to other officers, because if you're an infantry commander, you get to come in and you are the expert. Like an infantry battalion commander probably knows the most about being an infantryman of any of the people in his unit, because he spent a lot of time studying it, maybe not actually doing it, but he spent a lot of time studying it. And it's a lot of theory stuff. Fast forward to, you get these documents that are getting created, and like these people don't read them. They don't have any idea what's in it. They get into the room and they're like, wait, what are we talking about? And you look in like I think the Army's counter drone manual, and like their number one thing was like a guy leaning against another guy shooting his rifle into the air. And this was like, or they were like trying to tell tanks how far in front of FPV drones they needed to aim to shoot. And a bunch of general officers were like, this is a good idea. The Abrams can take them down one shot at a time.
They're going to have the Abrams with a coax or the main gun?
The main gun.
Good Lord.
The main gun shooting at FPVs and then them trying to show how much they can lead. And the only answer for that
was Wile E. Coyote the head of Army operations.
Yes. But nobody has looked at that officer who wrote that since he was a captain and said, that's fucking retarded. You can't do that. Like, and if somebody would like routinely over their career, they wouldn't think ideas like that were good ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say as you know, my first job in the Army was a Bradley gunner, and I remember going to an NTC rotation, and I asked my first line, I was like, hey man, like they got these drones at NTC now. What am I supposed to do? And he's like, I don't know, just point your 240 at it. So and in some ways we have come a long way from that. There's the cancer machines that we put on our backs, the EW jammers.
They're going the front now. Have you seen the new one? It goes across the front of the it really is. It's like double-breasted, 2 RF emitters on the front of a human. It's a Dutch company that made it, and I guess it's so that all the RF goes directly into your brain and gets caught by your helmet
heart.
and then refracted back. Yeah.
But I want to end on this point on the counter UAS thing, which is that there is this recurring tendency in I won't just say the U.S. Army. I will say broadly in militaries to kind of go between like offense is the answer and total defense is the answer. And we've said before that like the offense defense balance is bullshit. You could, in theory, wrap yourselves in Kevlar and you will be somewhat protected from an FPV, or you could wrap a tank in those ridiculous protective tents that the Russians put on their tanks, right? That does not have a net benefit to it in terms of actually being able to conduct operations. And so when you're talking like counter UAS from a kinetic standpoint or an EW standpoint is absolutely necessary. But it's to your point about you have to be able to layer it. You have to be able to choose what targets to protect. And if you're a staff from the Pentagon or on the Hill, like these are the types of questions that you need to be asking people when they tell you that they have a solution for this.
Yeah, Tony, you just gave me a little bit of an emotional reaction because it sounded like counter IED theory of 20 years ago. Because there was a new battlefield implement, when not particularly new, but it was something that the military had not trained against, was causing extraordinary operational disruption. And similar to the FPV or UAS threat of the 2020s, back then the Army was trying to scramble to figure out ways to suppress this threat from, to an extent, former regime elements and Al-Qaeda wannabes, 1920s brigades, Sunni nationalists or Sunni religious diehards were using it. But it was really the government of Iraq and its aligned Iranian paramilitaries were using exquisite explosive profiles against the United States and allies in the country. And there were entire 3-star commands that were rolled out to try and come up with a system. And one of those systems was we were parked in vehicles that were overlaid with ammunition, with armor protection. The armor protection was marginally helpful, but you're effectively putting several thousand pounds of armor on a vehicle in a suspension that it can't handle. So the vehicles are constantly breaking down. Your mobility is extraordinarily limited. You can't leave hardball roads or you sink. So even if the IED network that the Iranian paramilitaries and their Iraqi government allies place were not actively killing Americans, they still canalized us. They still struck down maneuver. They still paralyzed decision-making in a really catastrophic way. If you see photos of me from like 2005, 2006, when I was walking around in Baghdad, I looked like a man-at-arms from Agincourt. Like the amount of kit that I had to carry in order to not be struck by the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune it basically made us not walk anywhere, not talk to Iraqis, not try to get down to the base level of what was happening in the Civil War. And I'm curious if there's anybody in the Army or in the Marine Corps right now who's reflecting on a justified panicked response to the IED network. And can any of that inform our contemporary response to the UAS threat network?
That's actually really, it's a really good segue. It's also a very, very good question. Yesterday I was at a defense industrial base roundtable, and somebody made reference to the speed of the MRAP development, which obviously came out of it was one of the overhangs. Again, humongous vehicles that set further off the ground, big V-shaped holes to kind of dissipate blast, which of course just meant that
South African
IEDs went deeper. Yeah.
Yeah.
But 18 months. It was Ash Carter's. It's the reason Ash Carter's a legend. It was 18 months to go from not having the MRAPs to having them. And somebody was like, well, in Ukraine, we're seeing 2 months. And the question kind of revolved around, could the American, defense industrial base in the United States actually switch on and move in the way that Ukraine's has? And I think part of identifying those problems up front, and one of the things I kind of said during the meeting was like, if you really wanted to know, one, you'd have to have the tolerances and all those. You set aside all the mechanical issues with like trying to produce at scale stuff for the military. I was like, but you have to have like a common idea of like what it is you're actually producing and what you're trying to like make the base produce. And right now it's so categories, where it's, exquisite parts, exquisite trucks, exquisite things. And the truth is like, it's a risk tolerance too. A lot of the reaction to UAS in the United States military is much like the reaction to IEDs in Iraq. And I'm not going to say that IEDs weren't terrible, but I think I looked up the casualty numbers and it was like total casualties or something was total was like 70,000 in Iraq. And that became the impetus for billions of dollars to be spent on anti-IEDs and restricting roads and not going out. And it was all risk aversion. Like all of that was bought from risk aversion. So that is another question is like.
And like the exquisite weapons that the government and their Iranian backers were using on us resolved to about 670 killed in action. And I don't mean to minimize that. I mean, that's a battalion dead, and then you're effectively taking a brigade plus off of the American order of battle through that. But by virtue of doing that, the Iranians owned the streets of Baghdad, and they were able to conduct extraordinary atrocities in conjunction with the government of Iraq against the unfavored people of Iraq. And it's something that people like me have to live down. We were there ostensibly to help the Iraqi society shake off the history of Baathism and reestablish something more noble and true. And we became either bystanders or facilitators of this extraordinary perversion that will be hung around our moral necks as a millstone for the rest of our lives. Even if we wanted to stop it, we couldn't move fast enough to do it.
So I know Justin's got about 10 minutes left, and not to immediately jump from Eric's, the quote Top Gear. And on that terrible note,
I got one more. I got one more thing on this in case you, if you're going to change the topic. So I've been mainlining Jake Sullivan in preparation for the show we did 2 days ago. One of these lines he has is like, look, Ukraine makes 1 million drones, is on track to make 1 million drones this year. America is a big reason why they have that industrial base in the first place. But imagining that happening in America seems very far-fetched. And one reason is okay, we're probably not going to be using Chinese parts if and when we need to turn that on. But also the idea that people would be blowing themselves up in their garages trying to make these. I mean, there's sort of risk tolerance both from the from the like infantrymen's perspective as well as from the defense industrial base perspective. And if you're playing around with this stuff and you're making things that are their purpose is to kill people, and you're doing it like not in the, I mean, this even happened in, we didn't even talk about this 2 weeks ago, Tennessee, like 12 people died. Okay.
Yeah. So I'll speak to that for 30 seconds. Yeah, but you can still build. First of all, America is the reason Ukraine built 1 million drones a week, was because Jake Sullivan Company slowed down the aid to Ukraine. So I'll just say that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, they wouldn't need 1 million UAS a week if they had combat air patrol, if they had an integrated IADS, if they had ATACMs in March 2022. I mean, was Jake wearing the hot dog man suit? We're all trying to find out why the Ukrainians had to adapt to this circumstance. Oh, I am so sick of this shit.
Oh, we're never getting sponsored.
Not by Jake Sullivan, that's for damn sure. Vox Media is off.
Well, you can't have a podcast sponsor another podcast. I mean, that's circular. So.
Yeah, it would be like OpenAI sponsoring
AI right now.
It would be like a deal that Microsoft's made with OpenAI. Of course, you can't have circular contractual relationships. That would be fraudulent.
So the other thing I'll say is that you can still get a 90% solution, right? Like if you read Apple in China, right? Apple starts off by basically paying at a very low wage spouses to like put circuit boards together in California garages, right? Like I would not deny that level of innovation for Americans if it was necessary, because one, we love to tinker, and two, you can leave the kinetic side to the government. Which is somewhat of a transition here to the article that Justin and I wrote a couple weeks ago on training and what does it mean to get after the right stuff? And I'll let Justin take the lead, because really, I mean, he wrote the draft and then I just made it pretty. So,
and we've talked about it, like the cult of warrior ethos that kind of comes out. And so what we try to do is we try to bend how we think about training in really 4 pillars. And they're the individual, they're the small unit tactics, then it gets into the larger unit tactics, and then it gets into combined arms maneuver. And kind of bedrock to all of those is the individual, because in that individual phase, you're teaching and learning how to move. Kind of we're talking about with the Ukrainians, like, I'm going to shoot, I'm going to move quickly, I'm going to maintain my gear. It's the type of discipline that doesn't come from MMA or fighting or jujitsu or whatever. Like that's a type of discipline. People talk about that, but that's not the type of discipline and the type of training that is actually important on the battlefield. Because we say it in the piece, but like one of the things, there's this huge index on like, you need to be able to fight and you got to do MMA and everybody's got to do jujitsu. But like the reality is that in a combat situation where guns and artillery and everything are going around, if you are in a fist fight, something has gone terribly, terribly wrong. And hopefully one of your friends with a gun is very close. Because if they're not, then one of their friends with a gun is very close. Because that's just like the way modern combat works, right? Like being able to win, put somebody in a rear naked choke or, put somebody in an arm bar, that all sounds great. But like the truth is, you just need to be able to get distance and get your gun up or hold them in place long enough for your buddy with a gun to come. So, and that kind of lays aside all of like the warrior ethos. I get the reason that the military for, age immemorial has done pugil sticks and had people in basic training like get hit at least once. But the majority of the reason behind that is not, we're going to make you a super hand-to-hand combat fighter. It's to show you that you're not going to die if somebody hits you one time and you can keep like making decisions. Because the majority of people in modern society haven't been hit in the face. But like I said, there's a utility to that. As you get through that individual training and you kind of go up the ladder, each individual's capability is predicated on the unit functioning as a whole. It's not the Spartan warrior leading in a charge. We have some automated responses that are built in a near ambush in the United States military. If there's a near ambush, that means somebody starts shooting at you from 25 to 50 meters away. You hit the ground, you turn, you throw grenades, you jump up and you rush. The reason you do that is because at 25 meters, you don't have decision space. Like, you have to have something that you do, because at 25 meters, if you freeze, you die. Like, that's just the reality. And you build in those type of automated decisions so that the unit buys space. And you have now it's an engagement that's 300 meters away. Now I know I have X amount of time. I can make decisions that get us into position to be able to, actively engage the military. All of that builds up into actually running training that is complex, difficult, and that units will routinely fail. And that's, to me, the point that we probably could have even spent more time on is I don't think units fail enough in training in the military. They go to these like joint national training centers and, joint readiness training centers and places like that. And everybody passes because it's a grade for that commander. So in the end, like, oh, you did great. You were a battalion commander, you were a brigade commander, you survived the crucible that is JRTC. The reality is the majority of those units should fail and then get reset and go through again. And that shouldn't be a knock, because they should be failing because they're going up against an enemy that's equally as capable of them, so that they're actually testing their capabilities. And they should be trying new and innovative solutions that haven't necessarily been worked out and that aren't always going to work. That's how you get into combat and actually have like a really good, robust decision-making capability, I think.
On that culture of training centers in the Army, like Justin described exactly why they're supposed to exist. But there's a notorious 4-star who became a 4-star who, in advance of going to these training centers, was known for paying out of pocket for commercial imagery of the training site. So rather than using traditional 1/50,000 military maps, he would have commercial imagery that showed all of the paths that the opposition force would be using. And he would go to soldiers who had recently served as like the bad guys, and he would say, all right, tell me how you're going to template the attack. Walk me through on these paths. So he went in with his brigade and he had his troops like with this exquisite intelligence lay out a bunch of complicated ambushes on these avenues of approach, and they wiped out the enemy. And people went and like patted him on the back and said, wow, you're really this battlefield genius. When really he hacked the game. He did a Kobayashi Maru. He cheated. He got plenty of accolades. He got written into a book by Tom Clancy, and we are still saddled with David Petraeus to this day.
So, okay. So I'm gonna jump in here and say, let me explain this to the staffers who are listening. So what a CTC is basically a month-ish long experience that started in the 80s, like many bad experiences, that that basically it is the culminating training event stateside, usually stateside. There's one in Germany. There's also one in Hawaii, and other nations have theirs, like in Korea, etc. Culmination of a training event for a brigade, now a division. They're actually going through a lot of pain points now. They're like, oh, like having 2 brigades talk at the same time, maneuver under division command, is actually like super hard, and we haven't done this in decades. And so it trains you on down from your individual tasks to how do you enter a theater, to how do you take towns, how do you seize territory, how do you deal with counterinsurgency stuff, how do you deal with high end fights, how do you deal with chemical weapons, how do you deal with drones, and so I would actually love to have somebody from like one of the CTCs come on and talk through like what their day job looks like right now and what they're training for. I think that would be great. But I just want to say, like, my first go round, there were a few memories that stick out. One was that drone one of just use your machine gun to shoot down the drones. 2 was going through a breach, and my first line, saying, oh shit, this is real world dangerous. 5 seconds before I'd asked my PA, hey sir, what's the plan here? Because you wouldn't let me sit through the brief. I had to be on the radio. And the third one was that, like, I just remember the sleep deprivation, and I think that is like, that is a skill that you cannot train for. It's only something you can experience. I think I got about 45 minutes a night for 2 weeks, which, they let you sleep a little bit more before the live fires so you don't, murder anybody. But I remember a CTC grader, the OCT, saying to us, "You guys are the most lethal platoon here. You also have the highest fratricide rate."
I mean, technically, he's not wrong in the first categorization. Then.
Yep.
Lethal doesn't have a directionality all the time.
Yeah, he didn't say effective.
Yes. But I think that gets to the point of like
2025. Lethal is the goal. Okay, Tony, you came too early.
What was your facial hair situation?
Oh no, I we had to shave.
He's dry.
We were not.
He's dry shaving in the Bradley.
Yes. It was not so bad that like we had to wear camo paint every day, which is like my personal gripe of watching other units have to wear. You're in a Bradley or a tank, and they're like, "You got to put your camo paint on." To hide from what? I'm in a tank. But there's some other stories there that were very informative, and I think informed a lot of my later writing of just like, God, is this really how we're going to operate? And if you're a staffer on the Hill and you have the opportunity, go watch an NTC rotation. So I tried this on the Hill, actually. I tried to get them to let me hang out with the OCTs and just like sleep in the back of a Humvee for a couple days, and they ghosted me. The Army was like, "We're not letting this guy do that."
Fuck no, he's not getting here. What do we do? You're going to have a staffer on the Hill walk and see what we do?
Yeah.
No.
I think that's an exceptionally good idea. I cannot overestimate how valuable I thought a CTC rotation was, especially the sleep deprivation that Tony mentioned. Just by way of reference, when I was at the Office of Strategic Capital, one of my recommendations was for borrowers who got direct loans or who participated in the SBA program for investment funds. Once they got licensed or once they received loans, we should take these fund leaders out to CTCs or to live fires and see actual soldiers and Marines employing contemporary technology so they understand some of the stress of war. And the resounding response from OSC's leadership was, "What's a CTC?"
Oh, good.
Yeah.
But so the problem with all of this is, and I think you hit on it with the Petraeus anecdote, and because it is right. Like what happens is, yes, it is a month. So ideally what's been happening is they've been doing individual training and small unit training and collective training that has then culminated in them going out and doing this training. And it should be training, which again, you should fail. What actually happens is they do a little bit of the individual and small unit and collective, and then they get into rehearsals. They start rehearsing what they think they're going to do at the CTC because that officer's grade for the year, and for now that we don't have combat, realistically, it's the only grade they're going to get that matters, is how well his unit performs at the CTC. And that just, to me, that engenders an unwillingness to accept prudent risk because I know I can play it this way and I'm going to be okay. Like if I do at least this well, I'll be fine. And like, they're trying to make marginal changes. They're not trying to go in and like, we've got a new theory. We're going to try this thing. That's not the downplay. I haven't been to a CTC in a couple of years. So, I am positive the OCs see changes, but I know that OCs that I have talked to historically will tell me or have told me, yeah, man, it's cookie cutter. Like one unit comes in, they try some things, they end up doing basically the same thing that the last unit did. And it's rinse, wash, and repeat, which maybe that's the right answer. But given the way the battlefield has changed in Ukraine and how it's evolved from Iraq to Ukraine, I can't imagine that CTC shouldn't also be undergoing like significant changes every iteration.
Yeah, I mean, Eric had a riff a show or two ago about how this is the model that he wants to train, is taking all this data and, turning it into some like, GPT-7 for Saturday Night Live war crimes. But if, all you have, if your training data is just the same thing over and over again, then you're not learning a lot. You're not playing around with the microwaves. You're not playing around with the, AI guided shotguns, what have you. You're just, pretending like it's 1998.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And a reason where, a place where all of this excitement about artificial intelligence and machine learning can be implemented is that the lessons learned aren't necessarily just the behaviors of the rotational units that go through and are there to train. It's also monitoring the opposition force, whether it's the 11th ACR out in California or the 509th down in Louisiana. Look at them and compel them to be different, make them nastier, make them smarter, make them faster, make them more perfidious, and use it to truly test what's happening out there. Because the old Soviet model of 2 motorized rifle battalions up front and 1 in the back is obviously dated, and it's time to adapt.
All right. We got to close with game of the week. Eric, what do you got for us?
After Here Come the Rebels and experiencing how to manage the Antietam campaign, I took out Worthington Games just to Antietam. Worthington is a smaller publisher, but they do really excellent brigade-level studies of individual battles. I've got their Antietam study. They've got one on Shiloh. They're publishing The Wilderness. It's coming out soon. And the Antietam game is really just it gives you the opportunity to be Robert E. Lee or George B. McClellan at that pivotal moment in American history.
McClellan wins that. He's president in 64.
Yes.
If he's able to maneuver south of the Army of Northern Virginia, prevent them from crossing back across the Potomac, he is a multiple term president, 3-4 times. He goes as long as he wants.
Well, yeah, because he also wanted to essentially be a tyrant, right? Like he had no qualms.
Big
he would have had no
Napoleon
qualms about
energy,
going.
yeah.
Yes, yeah.
He literally wrote that in letters to his wife. He was like, now I understand how Napoleon feels. It's like, oh, okay. It's like 35 or something too. Super young during all this, right?
Yeah. And you can't say enough. You can't elevate enough nasty charges against McClellan as a character, as an American politician, and really as a battlefield commander. He was middling at best, but he also did forge the logistic architecture, the organizational scheme, the communications patterns, the reliance on telegraph, the superior artillery and the professional cavalry around the Army of the Potomac that enabled better men like George Meade and then, of course, U.S. Grant to turn that into a fighting force that broke up the Army of Northern Virginia in detail. So McClellan set conditions that better men finished. And it's good that he exited stage left in the way that he did and retired to New Jersey, because he would have been a tyrant and he probably would have pulled the necessary strings to make that possible and not even attempt reconstruction.
I saw like a plaque the other day. George McClellan's son was the 93rd mayor of New York City, who served from 1904 to 1909. Even if he didn't get elected to official office, he did have a bit of a legacy there. More George B. McClellan Jr. facts to come on the next edition of Second Breakfast. Thanks for hanging out today.
Eyes up, slew to Q, seconds, not minutes. FPV streak 200, limitless. Spotter up high, striker in the weeds. Red box airframe, needle on the speeds. PIDs brittling a cluttered world. Birds in the bokeh, prop wash swirl. Computer vision, praying for a better tomorrow. Friend folk split, too thin to borrow. From cue to shot, the clock runs lean. Acquisition window, razor clean. Don't live where you transmit. Break the link, break the link. Don't live where you transmit. Break the link, break the link. Don't live where you transmit. Break the link, break the link. Shoot and move, fade the ping, fade the ping, fade the ping, yeah. Boy, I understand, W kinetic, Moscow, early ID, then scatter pro, let it stack. W kinetic, Moscow, early ID, then scatter cold, let it stack. W kinetic, Moscow, early ID, then scatter, break the road. Hey, they call RF, drag fiber like a toe. 515 clicks, hardline flow, urban literal, rooftops, cranes, 10-foot terminal on red lane, shotgun burst, that's last resort. Fire, Really, I can edit.